My name is Rachel, and I'm 51 years old. 2 years have passed since that fateful night, but every time the clock hits 10:15, my chest tightens as if someone is squeezing it. People say time heals all wounds, but some scars aren't on your skin. They exist in the gray area between reality and the supernatural, between life and death, where science has no answers. Christopher and I were happily married for over 20 years. He was a quiet, dedicated man who worked as a shipping clerk at a warehouse in Los Angeles for 18 long years. This past January, Chris decided to retire to find a slower pace of life. His old co-workers organized a small farewell party for him in Ely, Nevada. I didn't go because I was stuck with a few projects at the office, but we stayed in constant contact. That evening, I was home alone. The house was quiet but cozy. Chris kept sending me photos through his phone, pictures of him laughing with a beer in his hand, and shots of his coworkers with their arms around his shoulders. I smiled, feeling happy that he was having such a great start to his retirement. I've always been a calm person. I never believed in superstitions or bad omens. However, around 9 p.m., a strange feeling of dread suddenly hit me. It wasn't just normal worry. It felt like a 1,000-pound weight was pressing down on my chest. My heart skipped beats, and I was so restless that I couldn't focus on the book I was reading. It felt like a dark cloud was hanging over the house, even though it was a clear night outside. Unable to shake the suffocating feeling, I decided to go to bed early. I hoped a deep sleep would chase away this groundless anxiety. I fell into a restless sleep filled with blurry dreams. Suddenly, I bolted awake. I was drenched in sweat, and the back of my nightshirt was soaked. I was gasping for air, as if I had just run a long distance in total panic. Instinctively, I glanced at the digital clock next to my bed. 10:15. Right then, I heard someone call my name. Rachel. The voice was very faint, but it was so clear that I recognized it instantly. It was Chris. I sat up straight and listened again, but there wasn't a second call. There was only a long, heavy silence in the house. I got out of bed, opened the bedroom door, and looked down the hallway. The yellow light cast shadows on the floor. At the end of the hall, a figure was standing there. I recognized my husband even before I could see his face clearly. Chris was standing there, hunched over slightly, with one hand clutching his stomach. His clothes looked darker than usual, and his hair was wet and matted against his forehead. In that first second, I thought he had been caught in the rain and had come home without me noticing. I called his name and walked quickly toward him. "I thought you were coming home later. Why didn't you turn the lights on?" Suddenly, Chris cut me off. He raised his hand, signaling for me to stop. I froze in the middle of the hallway, confused. "Chris, what's wrong?" When he looked up at me, his eyes were strange. They stared deep into mine, filled with both love and an overwhelming sadness. "I love you." I was even more confused. Chris was usually very quiet and rarely said things like that out of the blue. Then, I began to realize something was very wrong. His shirt wasn't just wet, it was soaked in dark, uneven patches. Under the yellow light, it looked almost black. While I was trying to tell myself I was just seeing things, a drop of liquid hit the floor. It made a very soft sound, but in the silence of the house, it was loud enough for me to hear. I stood there, paralyzed. Another drop fell. A metallic copper smell began to fill the air. My eyes drifted down. His hand was gripping his stomach, and his fingers were dripping. The dark liquid was leaking through his hands and hitting the floor, drop by drop. That was when I understood. What made his clothes wet wasn't water. It was blood. I panicked instantly. I ran back to the bedroom to find my phone, my hand shaking so hard I almost dropped it. My only thought was to call 911, but just as I touched the screen, an incoming call popped up. I froze for a few seconds before realizing it was a call from the police department. I answered, planning to ask them to send an ambulance to my house. The man on the other end introduced himself as an officer from Ely, Nevada. "Is this Rachel? I'm so sorry to give you this news. Your husband, Christopher, was in a severe car accident on the highway heading toward Ely. He passed away at the scene." I heard every word clearly, but the clearer the words became, the more my world fell apart. My brain couldn't process it. I thought for a moment that the caller was a scammer. "That's impossible. My husband is right here at home. I just talked to him." As soon as I said that, I ran back into the hallway, but no one was there. I stood frozen at the sight. There were no bloodstains. There were no wet footprints. There was only the familiar yellow light and an empty, silent space. The phone rang again. This time it was the hospital. They told me Chris's body was being moved to the morgue in Ely and asked me to come and identify him. They also asked if I had any family nearby who could help with the next steps. I collapsed onto the floor. Was I dreaming, or was this real? What was happening? The person on the line was still talking, but I couldn't hear them anymore. My ears were ringing, and every sound felt like it was underwater. I forced myself to breathe. I called his name one more time, but there was no answer. I walked the hallway and searched the entire house for Chris, but found nothing. I checked the bathroom, the living room, and even the front door to make sure it was still locked from the inside. Everything was exactly as it should be. The house was the same. I was the only thing that had changed. When the hospital called a second time to confirm my arrival, they repeated my husband's name, his birthday, his license plate, and the road where the crash happened. Those specific details were like knives cutting through my last bit of hope. I drove to the hospital in a daze, but I was conscious enough to know that my life had changed forever. When they pulled back the white sheet and I saw Chris's face, my world finally collapsed. It wasn't a mistake or a cruel joke. It was my husband. After finishing all the paperwork, the only question I asked the police was what time the accident happened. The officer checked the file and replied, 10:15 p.m. Immediately, I felt a jolt of electricity run through my body. 10:15 p.m. was the exact moment I had bolted awake in a panic for no reason. That was the same moment I heard Chris call my name. Did I see Chris's ghost? How is that even possible? 2 years have gone by. I still live in this house, and I have accepted that Chris is gone. What happened at 10:15 that night might have just been my mind playing tricks on me during a moment of loss. But maybe, in that thin space between life and death, he found his way home one last time to tell me he loved me. I miss him every single day.
My name is Elton. I'm 31 years old, single, and living in New York City. They call this the city that never sleeps, but ironically, I'm the one person among these millions of people who craves sleep the most. My insomnia started a few years ago. As my career took off, I let myself get buried alive by my work. At first, it was just a few nights of tossing and turning. Eventually, it turned into a nightly nightmare. Because I was so busy and a bit stubborn, I never went to a hospital to figure out what was actually wrong. Instead, I tried to fix myself with supplements from the local pharmacy and mild sleeping pills I found online. It was just enough to keep me going. Then came one particular night. I had worked 15 hours straight to hit a deadline for a massive project. When I got home, I was so exhausted that I barely got my shoes off before collapsing onto the bed. For the first time in 4 years, I fell asleep instantly without any medication. It felt like a miracle. But that sleep didn't bring any rest. Instead, it pulled me into a nightmare that felt terrifyingly real. In the dream, I was lying in a stark white hospital bed. The sharp smell of antiseptic filled my nose. A headache hit me so hard, it felt like thousands of needles were piercing my skull. A middle-aged doctor with a kind face but sad eyes walked over to my side. He looked at my medical chart and spoke softly. "Elton, the test results are in. Your brain tumor has reached a late stage of metastasis. That is why you haven't been able to sleep all this time." The physical pain combined with the shock felt like a tsunami hitting me. I couldn't say a word. The dream continued with scenes of me being wheeled into radiation therapy and hooked up to IV drips. Every detail was incredibly sharp. I even remembered the doctor's name clearly, Dr. Alan Chen. His face was burned into my mind. Hazel eyes, black-rimmed glasses, and a small butterfly-shaped pin on his white coat. I woke up at 3 a.m., trembling from the memory of the physical pain in the dream. I looked around my room, relieved to realize it was just a dream, but it took a long time for my heart to stop racing. That morning, I went to work feeling like I was in a fog. The name Dr. Alan Chen kept spinning in my head. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and searched the name on Google. The results made me drop my coffee mug. There he was, Dr. Alan Chen, neuro-oncologist at Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York. I clicked on his profile picture. It was him. The same eyes, the same glasses, and there was even a photo of him wearing that butterfly pin at a medical event. I had never met this man, never heard his name. So how could my subconscious create such a perfect replica of him? Digging deeper, I found that he had a personal blog where he shared clinical cases. I started scrolling through the list of followers and comments. On the third page, I froze. There was an account named Elton Rivers. That is my full legal name. I clicked on his profile. This man had shared so much about his battle with illness. As I read, my skin began to crawl. Elton Rivers was 32 years old, suffered from metastatic brain cancer, and his primary physician was Dr. Alan Chen. I read his descriptions of the headaches, the horrific nights of insomnia, and the rounds of radiation and chemo. Everything matched what I had experienced in my dream perfectly. It was as if I had lived his life during those few hours of sleep. The scariest part was the final post on the blog, dated 2 years ago. "I'm so tired today. The doctor says this new medication is our last hope. Goodbye, everyone." There were no updates after that. I searched further and found out that Elton Rivers had passed away on September 14th, 2023, ending a 2-year battle with brain cancer. I sat there in total silence, staring at the screen. This man had my name. I had dreamed his journey as if it were my own. I stayed in a state of shock for weeks. I tried to tell myself it was just a bizarre coincidence of fate. But then, a few weeks ago, a major headline caught my eye. Famous oncologist arrested for illegal drug trials on patients. The article explained that Dr. Alan Chen had been arrested for using experimental drugs not approved by the FDA. Some patients had suffered severe side effects. The police were reinvestigating the deaths of several former patients, suspecting they died due to unsafe treatments. One of the names mentioned in the report was Elton Rivers. I sat there, numb, for 10 minutes. There was that name again. I don't know if the connection between these events is random or something deeper. I've never been a big believer in the supernatural or reincarnation, but that dream and those terrifying coincidences haunt me. I've started to believe it was a warning. Maybe I have some kind of spiritual connection to that other Elton. Since that day, I've started prioritizing my health like never before. I booked a full physical, saw a sleep specialist, and began a real treatment plan to fix my insomnia for good. Life is too fragile to waste on being stubborn or letting exhaustion take over. Thanks to that strange dream, I've learned to listen to and take better care of my body.
About 10 years ago, I was driving alone from New Jersey to Texas to visit my parents. On the way, on a deserted stretch of road, my car started acting up. I kept mumbling a prayer to my car. This was not the time or place to have car trouble. I pulled the car over, opened the hood, and looked at the engine. The car definitely had a problem, but I didn't know anything about engines to figure out what was wrong. I was panicking and didn't know what to do. I didn't have an AA membership, and my friends were thousands of miles away. I felt completely alone and unsafe, like I was in the middle of a never-ending void. There was nothing around but cornfields and a long, empty road. The wind blew through the corn stalks, making a rustling sound that made me feel even more isolated. A few minutes later, a white pickup truck with no front license plate slowed down and stopped right behind my car. A man in his 40s, with a rugged look, messy curly hair, and an uneven long beard, got out. He didn't greet me or ask what was wrong. He just introduced himself as a mechanic and bent down to look at my car's engine. I felt uncomfortable with the way he was looking at me, but I thought to myself that I might be too suspicious. After messing around for a while, he said he needed a compression test kit and that his friend, who was also a mechanic, could bring it. He complained that his phone was dead and asked to borrow mine. At this point, I started to hesitate, but I quickly thought that if I didn't accept his help, there was no other way. As soon as I handed him my phone, he pulled a gun from his jacket, pointed it at me, and ordered, "Sit down on the side of the road and don't do anything stupid." I stared at the gun, frozen. My hands and feet were shaking and my mind was blank. I did what he said and my heart was pounding so hard I thought it was going to burst. He went through my pockets, took my wallet, my laptop, and made me tell him my phone password. Done. He got into his truck and drove away, leaving me on the side of the road with a cold emptiness and a feeling of complete helplessness. I stood there shaking and angry. I gritted my teeth and swore I would find him. Luckily, a little later, another man in a pickup truck drove by and helped me start my car. The man kept asking me if I was okay, but I just nodded robotically, my mind still in a daze. And to be honest, I didn't trust anyone anymore, even though he had just helped me. I continued my journey to my parents' house. The next few weeks were a continuous cycle of canceling cards, getting new documents, changing passwords, and trying to recover what I had lost. Every time I got a call from a bank or checked my email, I was terrified that something else bad would happen. About 2 months later, I received a letter from a strange bank thanking me for opening a new line of credit. I stared at the letter. Then came a letter from Best Buy with a credit card in my name and over $1,000 in transactions in a strange town in Tennessee. At that moment, I remembered that my Social Security card was in my wallet when it was stolen. Now he had enough information to become me. I threw the letter onto the table and ran my hands through my hair. The feeling of helplessness and anger welled up. The nightmare wasn't over. My life quickly fell into chaos. A series of debts, new credit cards, and bad credit reports appeared. I filed a report with the FTC, put a fraud alert on my credit, and froze my credit. The police weren't much help because I didn't have the bastard's name or license plate number. The road where the robbery happened also didn't have any surveillance cameras. Every phone call, every time I had to explain the story, exhausted me more. I also called the police departments in the towns where the fraudulent transactions happened, but everything was still at a dead end. It felt like I was fighting a ghost. The breaking point was when my health insurance company called, saying that someone had been admitted to the emergency room in Georgia under my name, creating a fake medical record. At this point, I couldn't take it anymore. My blood was boiling with rage. I spent all my free time trying to track him down. The image of his rugged face kept appearing in my mind, urging me not to give up. One night, I checked Craigslist in the areas where the fraudulent transactions happened. My eyes were tired from staring at the screen for hours. In Tennessee, I saw a post selling electronics and miscellaneous items, all of which matched the items that were charged to the Best Buy card in my name. I finally had a lead. I contacted him to buy the items, of course, through text messages. A few days later, he asked to meet in a public place and requested cash. I considered driving there myself, but I was afraid I would lose control, so I called the police department there. The details I gave them made them agree to work with me. I also talked him into revealing that he drove a red pickup truck. That day, the police set up an ambush. I was not at the scene, but waited for the results at the police station. As soon as he saw the patrol car, he sped away, lost control, and drove into a ditch. He was arrested very quickly. The crash wasn't very serious. Even more surprising, from his confession, the police tracked down a professional criminal group. They specialized in targeting tourists and solo drivers on interstate highways. In the end, they were all arrested, charged, and went to prison. When I heard the news, I felt both relieved and bitter. The losses and the fear were still there, but at least this time, justice was on my side. I collapsed into a chair, and the last tears rolled down my cheeks. I no longer drive at night, no matter how long or short the distance is. If I have to, I'll ask someone to go with me. And even though I don't drive at night, I signed up for an AAA membership. You never know what kind of unwanted situations you might get into. So, be careful, and be prepared so you can handle everything as smoothly as possible. That's the expensive lesson I learned. My name is Sarah, and I'm 31 years old. I've been working at the 911 call center in Austin, Texas for almost 5 years. With experience handling thousands of emergency calls, I was confident that I could predict any situation that might happen. But the call that night will haunt me for the rest of my life. It was a normal night shift. The phone rang, and I picked it up. On the other end was a grumpy man's voice saying he wanted to complain about a noise. When I asked him to give me more details about the situation, the man suddenly yelled, "What? I'm sorry, I can't hear you because of all the screaming." I was a little startled by his shouting, but I listened very carefully, and I didn't hear any noise at all. When I told him that, he spoke in an annoyed tone and accused me of thinking he was lying. He was like a child who gets an attitude over the smallest things. But honestly, throughout the entire conversation, I didn't hear any other sounds. He continued to pour out his complaints, his voice becoming more and more tense. According to him, this had been going on for 3 hours straight, and the new neighbors had been causing such a disturbance for 6 months now. He described the loud music, the heavy footsteps that sounded like they were stomping on his head, and the slap sounds coming from the apartment upstairs. I tried to calm him down because I could feel the tension escalating on the other end of the line. He confessed that he was exhausted with these inconsiderate a-holes. He had tried everything, talking to them, contacting the building owner. But they laughed at him with contempt, and the landlord told him to stop hallucinating. The frustration in his voice seemed to be reaching its peak, making me feel anxious. Then everything started to take a disturbing turn. He suddenly mentioned a fight that happened the night before. As usual, that guy and his girlfriend were playing their favorite music and doing their thing to the beat. I was about to lose my mind. He described it as if his brain was about to explode and smoke was coming out of his nostrils. He insisted that he wasn't usually hot-tempered or rude and had never hit anyone. But that night, something compelled him to act. My heart beat a little faster. "Did you get into a physical fight with him?" "Yeah," he answered. A short but cold response. And then, the horrifying words began to pour out. The man said he chose the biggest and sharpest knife in the house. He described going upstairs and knocking on the door. When the young couple opened the door, he felt they looked at him with contempt and defiance. They looked at me like I was a lowlife, like they were saying, "I want to torment you." I stabbed the kid right in the neck and face. He didn't scream or say anything. He just fell down. His girlfriend was hiding behind the sofa, shaking like a leaf, with her eyes bulging out. What happened next made me cover my mouth to keep from screaming. The man talked about chasing the girl with the knife in his hand, forcing her back into the living room, throwing her on the sofa, and starting to slash her. I took a deep breath and asked how many times he did that to the girl. Who remembers? At least 100 times. He only stopped when he saw too much blood flowing. He then threw the knife away and left as if nothing had happened. But what gave me goosebumps the most wasn't the brutal actions, but the man's complete lack of emotion after recounting it all. I know I should have called an ambulance for them, but they're not hurt. And then, in an unbelievable absurdity, the man went back to the original reason for his call. His voice was filled with frustration again, just like when he first complained that his neighbors were still playing loud music. Throughout the call, I hadn't heard any other sounds besides his voice. I tried to control my shivers. My mind was in a mess with the horrifying information I had just heard, but I had to keep my voice calm and continue the conversation to buy time for the police to pinpoint his exact location. I reassured him and told him to stay in his apartment and wait for the police to arrive. I couldn't believe that one day I would have to sit and listen to a murderer recount his crime. When the police arrived at the building, they didn't hear any unusual sounds from the apartment upstairs. A complete silence enveloped the entire building. And then, the horrifying truth was revealed step by step. The man, after a thorough investigation, turned out to be a former sharpshooter in the army who had been discharged for serious mental health issues. He was having severe hallucinations. The noises, music, and screaming he heard only existed in his disturbed mind. The horrifying scene was only discovered when he himself called to complain about the noise from the apartment upstairs. The young couple there was dead. There was no one in that apartment to create the sounds he heard, and no one to turn off the music that only existed in his sick imagination. He had killed 2 innocent people in his hallucination, completely unaware of the true extent of his brutality. In his disturbed mind, he still thought he was just scaring the couple to make them stop the noise. I will never forget that call. It was a terrifying reminder of the destructive power of mental illness if left untreated, and how fragile the line between reality and illusion can be. On my shifts after that, every time the phone rang, I felt a shiver down my spine. My name is Erica. I was born and raised in Texas with my parents, in a quiet residential neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. We lived in a small house with a spacious backyard that my dog, Molly, loved. This happened when I was 18. One day, I was walking Molly. The familiar road past 2 tall apartment buildings where I often saw my neighbors coming and going. That day, 3 men were smoking on the front porch. Their laughter echoed from a distance. 2 of them didn't notice me, but the other guy stared. He looked older than the other 2, probably in his late 30s, and was bald. His eyes made me a little scared. I quickly turned my face away, trying to walk faster. Suddenly he called from behind, "Hey little lady, your dog is so cute. Come here and let me pet it." While he was taunting me, the other 2 men burst out laughing. I immediately left and quickly ran home, not daring to look back. At first, I didn't tell my parents, thinking it was just a harmless joke, but I was completely wrong. The next day, I walked Molly again. Remembering the 3 men from yesterday, I brought pepper spray just in case. When I passed the same house, I silently prayed not to see that strange man, but he was already sitting on the rocking chair on the porch, his eyes staring at me. I quickly ran across the street as soon as I saw him. The sound of heavy footsteps behind me told me he was chasing me. In a panic, I tripped and fell. He was right behind me. I screamed for help, hoping someone would hear me. His dirty hand covered my mouth, followed by a laugh of amusement. Luckily, I remembered the pepper spray. I quickly took it out and sprayed it directly into his eyes. He yelled in pain and let go of me, cursing repeatedly. I quickly picked up Molly and ran home as fast as I could. As soon as I got home, I immediately told my parents what happened. My dad, a former Marine, was about to go handle the guy himself, but my mom advised me to go to the police station. There, I gave my statement to the officer and showed him the scratches on my knee, but he just took a few notes and told me they would patrol the area. A few months passed. I started working at a 7-Eleven to earn some extra money. One night after my shift, as I turned the corner near my house, I noticed an old truck driving very slowly behind me. At first, I didn't think anything of it, but when I got in front of my house, I looked back and saw 2 men in the truck staring at me. A familiar feeling of fear came over me. I knew for sure they were following me. I quickly went inside and told my parents. A few weeks later, my dad started watching the front of our house at night. He installed more motion sensor lights and security cameras. But those measures were not enough for what was about to happen. That terrifying night started around 2 a.m. Molly's fierce barking came from outside the window. I was in a deep sleep after a long, tiring shift. The barking became more and more urgent, as if it was signaling danger, but my exhaustion made me ignore Molly. I'm not sure how long after, Molly's voice woke me up again, but it took a few seconds for me to realize it was a weak whimper. I jumped up and ran to find Molly. I froze when I saw Molly lying motionless on the floor. A red liquid was spreading under her small body. Her eyes were wide open, looking at me with a look of painful despair. I started to cry and quickly picked Molly up. A dark shadow appeared from the corner of the room. The bald man walked out. He laughed with delight. "Did you think you could get away from me, little girl?" Terror took over my entire body. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. He lunged at me with terrifying speed. His heavy body pinned me down, making it hard to breathe. He repeatedly punched me in the face. The pain spread all over my head, and my ears were ringing. I felt blood flowing from my nose, and a salty taste spread through my mouth. With my last bit of strength, I tried to struggle and kicked wildly at him. When I saw him start to unbuckle his belt, my terror peaked. I screamed with all the strength I had left. His dirty hand covered my mouth. Tears streamed down my face. I thought my life was over. Suddenly, the bedroom door burst open. My dad yelled, his face red with anger, holding a gun pointed directly at the man. My mom stood behind him, her face pale with fear. 2 gunshots rang out, shaking the entire room. I pushed him off me and collapsed on the floor, shaking uncontrollably. My dad quickly rushed over and took the man down. My mom ran to me, hugged me tightly, and called the police. I looked at Molly. My little friend was still in a pool of blood, but wagged her tail slightly when she heard my voice. Molly was alive. A few minutes later, the police arrived and arrested the man. But it wasn't just him. They found his 2 accomplices tied up in the backyard. They had also been part of this terrifying plan. They intended to break in, kidnap, and assault me. Luckily, they were all caught and later sentenced. Molly was taken to the vet in time and made a full recovery. To this day, I still live with my parents because the fear of being alone still haunts me. Molly is old now, but still healthy. I spend more time with Molly, always appreciating and grateful for my loyal friend who saved my life. 3 years have passed, but I still can't forget the face of the man in the black hoodie. Even though everyone says it was just a nightmare, I know what I saw on that security monitor that night was real. My name is Taylor. At the time, I was 16 years old and often took jobs house sitting and dog sitting for the Carson family. My dad was good friends with Mr. Carson, so I had been going to their house since I was a kid. The Carson family's mansion was in Jackson, Michigan. From the main gate to the house was a long driveway. The 2-story house had a classic Victorian architectural style, with 3 bedrooms and a spacious guest room. It took me over an hour to drive from my house to theirs. Around 9 p.m., I made some popcorn and watched a movie on Netflix. The 2 dogs lay quietly next to me, but I noticed they kept perking up their ears as if they were listening to something. I muted the TV to hear better, but there was nothing. After a while, I decided to go to bed. The guest room was on the 1st floor. The 2 dogs slept with me. They lay on a furry rug next to the bed. Around midnight, I was woken up by a jingling sound. I realized it was the dogs' collars. They were both sitting straight up, ears perked, eyes staring at the door with a very cautious look. I lay motionless, straining to listen. The house was still silent, with only the tick-tock of the clock in the hallway. Then I heard a humming sound, like the static you hear when a radio loses its signal. I remembered the baby monitor that Mrs. Carson kept in the corner of the hallway, directly across from my room. This system not only showed images from the camera placed in the main living room on the 1st floor, but could also be controlled remotely to turn lights on and off in different rooms. I tiptoed out of the bedroom. I approached the security monitor in the hallway. On the screen was a pitch-black image of the main living room. After fumbling for a bit, I found the button to turn on the main living room light. I hesitated for a moment, then pressed the button. A blinding light from the large chandelier lit up the entire living room on the monitor. And in that moment, I saw him. A young man, wearing a black hoodie, was hunched behind the sofa. He looked up at the ceiling where the camera was mounted, and I looked at him on the small screen. He jumped up and ran out of the camera's view. My body reacted before my mind could think. I ran back to the bedroom and locked the door tightly, quickly grabbing my essentials into my backpack. There was no time to think. I opened the bedroom window and climbed out. I could still hear the two dogs barking loudly inside the house. I ran as fast as I could toward my car, not daring to look back. As soon as I got into the driver's seat, I immediately locked all the doors, started the engine, and sped away. I tried to call the Carsons, but my call went straight to voicemail. When I got home, I sent a long text message explaining everything that had happened to both Mr. and Mrs. Carson. The next morning, Mr. Carson called back. His voice sounded worried but also skeptical. "Taylor, we're very worried about you. We drove home right after we got your message. We checked the whole house, from the basement to the attic, and there were no signs of a break-in. Nothing was missing either, except for the two dogs being locked in the living room." Mrs. Carson took the phone and said, "Our security system is very good. No one could have broken in." So, they didn't believe me. But I remembered every detail of what I had seen on that security monitor. From that day on, I refused all of the Carson family's offers for dog sitting. Even though many years have passed, I still can't forget the moment I saw his face on that security monitor. The Carson family's skepticism couldn't erase the image of the man in the black hoodie. What I went through that night still haunts me. When the police found Sam in the dark room of that broken-down mobile home, he had been bound and tortured for 730 days. It all started with a gentle smile at Oktoberfest. 5 years ago in the fall, my two brothers and I decided to go to the annual Oktoberfest in Munster. It's a tradition in our small town nestled in the Texas hills. It took us about an hour and a half to drive to Munster. I was 27 at the time. My older brother Jake was 30, and my youngest brother Sam was 23. The three of us have always been close, especially with our shared passion for classic cars. The festival had a huge car show, and that was the main reason we went. We parked near the edge of the trees and started the 15-minute walk into town. It was mid-morning, and everything seemed normal until she appeared. Just before we walked up the second bridge, a woman approached us. She was about 25 years old, with long hair and a gentle smile. "Excuse me, I'm looking for the festival. Can you help me?" she asked. I was a little confused. It was strange. The festival was right in front of us. The noise from the rides, the music, and the laughter filled the air. It wasn't hard to find. "We're heading there now. Just cross the bridge, and you'll see everything." "I'm looking for the market. Do you know where it is?" Sam, the most enthusiastic of us, spoke up. "I can take you there. It's not far." I hesitated, but Jake patted Sam on the back. "See you at the car show later," Jake said. Sam nodded, waved lightly, and went with the woman. Jake and I spent the next few hours at the car show, completely engrossed in the rows of restored classic cars. It wasn't until midday that I glanced at my watch and realized Sam hadn't come back yet. At first, we weren't worried. Maybe he was still with the woman, helping her find her way. But by 2 p.m., we started to feel uneasy. We walked all over the festival searching, but we couldn't find Sam. We tried to call him, but his phone just rang and no one picked up. We were finally desperate. We went to the local police officer on duty at the festival and told him our brother was missing. The officer reported it on his radio, but with the festival at its busiest, the search was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Late at night, the festival had closed. The streets that were once bustling were empty, and Sam was nowhere to be found. We walked back to the parking lot, hoping Sam would be there, but there was no one. We checked into a cheap roadside motel, leaving a message for Sam, hoping he would call back. By the next morning, the reality that Sam was gone had hit us. We filed a missing person report at the local police station. Over the next week, We searched all over town, put up missing posters, and checked every gas station, motel. Everything was hopeless. 2 years passed, and we had almost given up hope. Then, right before Christmas, we got a phone call. The police chief called. "We've found Sam. The family needs to get here immediately." Jake and I dropped everything and drove there that night. The police chief told us what had happened. The police had raided a broken-down mobile home on the outskirts of town after neighbors reported suspicious activity. They found illegal drugs, weapons, and stolen property. And in one of the back rooms, they found Sam. He was in the worst possible condition, bound, malnourished, beaten, and drugged for the past 2 years. Sam was then taken to the hospital. Thank God, he was completely aware. He remembered everything that had happened. Sam said the woman had lured him into an alley. 3 men attacked Sam. They threw him into the back of a pickup truck and took him to the mobile home. For 2 years, Sam was bound and tortured. He tried to escape twice and was beaten so badly that he thought he would die. Those men were part of a human trafficking ring, and Sam wasn't their first victim. Those monsters were arrested and sentenced to life in prison. The woman who lured Sam has still not been found. Sam survived and came back, but he was never the same again. To this day, I still can't shake the feeling of guilt about Sam. There are many other victims, people who were not as lucky as Sam. So, if you're ever at a small-town festival and someone is too friendly and asks for help, think carefully before you go with them. I'm Ethan, a college student in California who was always short on cash. In 2008, when the economic crisis made part-time jobs scarce, Craigslist became my lifeline. The website was like a hidden treasure, with countless opportunities to make quick money, from moving furniture to participating in research surveys. I lived in a small apartment with 2 friends on the outskirts of the city. Every morning, after drinking coffee and checking my email, I would open Craigslist out of habit. I often checked the free section for things I needed, then browsed the for sale section for bargains. But the section I visited most often was gigs. One afternoon in the fall, while browsing the job listings, a title made me stop. Make money by helping with a medical procedure for $1,000. That number made my eyes light up. Maybe it was helping a disabled person or taking care of a patient at home. I clicked on the post. The first few lines made me frown, then I laughed when I understood the real content. The medical procedure the poster mentioned was the amputation of his own right leg, just below the knee. He needed someone to come to his apartment to assist him with this self-performed surgery, to make sure he didn't bleed out or go to sleep forever. The post's writing was both funny and knowledgeable, so much so that I thought it was definitely a sophisticated prank. The writer even guaranteed that no experience was needed. He would teach me how to apply a tourniquet and handle the wound. When I saw the email address, I was completely convinced this was the work of a group of medical students playing a prank. In good fun, I sent a short email praising their unique sense of humor. "You guys made me laugh so hard. Great idea." The response came faster than I thought. The sender's name was Dexter. He insisted this was not a joke. I replied with a skeptical tone, saying I still didn't believe him. He explained that the amputation was something he had been planning for years and had even practiced on one of his fingers to prepare for this major surgery. My curiosity won out, and I asked him about the motivation behind this bizarre decision. Dexter said that when he was 8 years old, a popular teenager in town was in a terrible car accident. The kid lost a leg, but miraculously survived. While everyone else showed pity, Dexter, at the time, felt jealous. He was jealous of the attention, sympathy, and privileges the teenager received. From then on, something in his brain flipped a switch, creating an obsession with losing a limb. I know this sounds crazy, but I've always felt incomplete. Losing a leg will make me feel whole, Dexter wrote. I still didn't believe him until he sent proof. The email had 2 attachments, a photo and a video. My heart pounded as I opened the first file. In the photo was a hand. On the back of the hand was the phrase Dexter amputation, along with the date of the email. But what made me look again and again was that the little finger was completely gone. All that was left was a scarred stump. My hands were shaking as I clicked on the video file. The screen showed a man wearing a white mask sitting at a table. In his hand was a large pair of bolt cutters. I wanted to turn the video off immediately, but my actions didn't follow my wishes. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. He placed his little finger between the two blades of the bolt cutters. There was no screaming, only the sound of metal and a slight snap. The finger fell onto the table like a broken toy. I felt sick, and I pushed my chair away from the screen. My hands were drenched in cold sweat. This was not a joke. Dexter had really done it. In the following emails, Dexter talked about how he had assisted a few other people. One man had amputated his genitals, with Dexter sitting next to him providing moral support. In another case, he helped a man submerge his leg in a bucket of ice for 20 continuous hours. The freezing temperature completely killed the tissue in his leg, forcing hospital doctors to amputate it. I don't take money from them. I do it because it's my mission, Dexter wrote. When I suggested he seek psychological therapy, Dexter flatly refused. Don't try to convince me. If you do, I'll stop replying to your emails. I sat there in a daze, my heart racing. Part of me was confused, and the other part just felt a shiver down my spine at the eerily calm tone of his words. But the craziest thing was that I exchanged emails with Dexter for weeks. He said he had found someone willing to help, a retired doctor. He agreed to help Dexter on the condition that he be paid $2,000. Dexter's last email came one morning. Today is the day. I'll let you know how it goes. As I read the words, my heart pounded. A feeling of tension and anxiety crept in. I didn't call the police. That's stupid, right? I found myself hard to understand at the time. I waited for an email from Dexter for several consecutive days, with an indescribable restlessness. I kept refreshing my inbox, hoping to see Dexter's name appear. A week passed in terrifying silence. I started sending emails. Are you okay? Please reply to me. I'm so worried. I didn't get any response. I imagined the worst-case scenarios. He could have died from blood loss. Or worse, he could still be alive but completely disabled. Or maybe he changed his mind at the last minute and disappeared to start a new life. I will never know the truth. And that's what haunts me more than anything. Sometimes, I still dream about Dexter. His face is hidden behind a white mask, and his stump of a finger silently points at me. After that, I stopped using Craigslist. I deleted the app from my browser and started looking for jobs through more official channels. Almost 8 years ago, when I had just moved in with my boyfriend, Kyle, who is now my husband, about 6 months had passed. I suggested that we adopt a puppy. I thought it would be a great opportunity to see if my boyfriend was ready to be a dad. So, we adopted Benny. From the moment we brought Benny home, he became a source of positive energy for us. With his bright eyes, perky ears, and playful personality, Benny kept us busy and filled every day with love. However, Benny absolutely hated the rats that lived near the building's trash cans. Benny would bark at the trash cans every time we took him out. Since our apartment was on the ground floor, it was a daily occurrence. The back of the building became a battlefield when Benny chased a rat and almost jumped over the fence. From then on, we knew we couldn't risk him going back there again. If he got over the fence, he could run straight into the highway. And then, one day, the unimaginable happened. We woke up, and Benny was gone. Kyle hadn't closed the back door carefully when he came home drunk the night before. I was completely devastated and very angry. I didn't say a word to Kyle until he swore with his heart and soul that he would bring Benny back. Kyle searched the entire neighborhood, knocked on every door, and put up missing dog flyers. He even posted an ad on the local Craigslist. For the next few days, I kept asking every 10 minutes, "Has anyone responded yet?" I knew that hoping too much would lead to more disappointment. But one day,
Kyle received a text message saying that Benny had been found. The person said he found Benny wandering near the highway and took him home. Then a friend told him about the Craigslist post, and he contacted us. We immediately called the man back, feeling incredibly excited. The man on the other end of the line sounded older and friendly. He told us he had taken good care of Benny. A sense of relief washed over us, and we couldn't hold back our tears. Then we quickly drove to the address the man sent us to pick up Benny. When we drove to the man's address, the surrounding area became desolate. I was a little nervous, so I checked the address, and it was completely correct. Kyle stopped the car in front of a rundown house. A man stood at the doorstep, waving us in. He said Benny was in the basement and motioned for us to enter the house. The house looked even worse up close. Kyle looked at me with a cautious expression and slightly shook his head. "Could you bring Benny up here?" "We'll wait here," I said. His smile disappeared for a moment. He invited us into the house again, but this time his eyes became colder. Kyle spoke up, his voice firm, as he said we wouldn't go inside and would wait outside. The man's mood completely changed. His face was quite annoyed. "All right," he said, and went back inside, leaving the door open. Kyle leaned toward me and whispered that something was very wrong and that we should leave, but I insisted on checking if Benny was really there before we left. We waited, but the man didn't come back. A few minutes passed and Kyle looked at his watch, his face serious as he said, "Let's go." Suddenly, the man came back, his face blank, with no sign of the initial friendliness. He asked coldly if we were going to come in. Kyle repeated that we weren't, and we started to walk away. It wasn't entirely my will. Kyle was pulling me away. I looked back, still hoping Benny was really there and would run out to happily greet me. I caught the man's gaze as he stared at us as we left. When we got to the car, he called after us, his tone quite calm, but Kyle drove away decisively. I stayed silent. My mind was only filled with the image of Benny. After a while, Kyle broke the silence. He said he didn't think the man really had Benny. The house, the neighborhood, the way the man acted, it all just seemed like a big trap. That thought sent a shiver down my spine. Amidst all the confusion that day, I kept wondering, what would have happened if we had walked into that house? That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying everything, especially the way the man's face changed when we refused. The next morning, I still felt uneasy. I looked up information about the house, and my stomach tightened when I saw that it had been foreclosed on years ago. I called the police and told them what had happened. About a week later, an officer called me and said they had found something in the house but wouldn't reveal what exactly it was. They just told me, "You're lucky you didn't go inside." When I heard that, my heart pounded as I imagined the terrible things hidden inside. So Kyle's guess was completely right. I was so lucky, I listened to him. We never found Benny. To this day, I still scroll through lost pet websites whenever I have a free moment or miss Benny. I stop and watch when I see a dog with perky ears that looks like Benny. Maybe Benny was taken in by a kind person. Or maybe he never left that house, and that's what the police didn't reveal so I wouldn't be heartbroken. I will always remember Benny. Wherever he is, I hope he felt our endless love for him. I was about to start my senior year of college, and I was so excited to finish this chapter and move on to what everyone calls the real world. My academic advisor suggested I join the mentorship program for incoming freshmen, acting as a big sister to help them out. I thought it was a great idea, and as my advisor said, it would look great on my resume. I wished I'd had a program like that when I was a freshman. I definitely wouldn't have felt so lost and anxious for the first few months. Everything went really well at first. I met a few of the students assigned to me, and genuinely felt like I was helping them ease their anxieties about starting college. On the first day of classes, I was supposed to meet a girl named Carol. She had canceled on me twice already. I figured she didn't need much help, but I was completely wrong. She needed help, but not from me. We finally met on our third attempt. Carol was a beautiful young woman, quite tall and athletic. The conversation was pleasant at first.
She seemed confident, independent, and fearless. After chatting for a few minutes, I asked her why she wanted to be in the program. She told me she just wanted to talk to me and see how awesome it was to be a senior. It was nice and refreshing to talk to such a level-headed young person, especially after meeting so many nervous and insecure freshmen. We talked for about 20 minutes and exchanged phone numbers. I didn't offer to meet up again because I didn't think she needed more support, but I told her she could call or text me anytime. About a month later, I started getting notes left on my car. They were short, sweet, and always signed by a secret admirer. I thought it was kind of cute, but since I wasn't looking for a relationship at the time, I never bothered to wonder who it was. Then the notes started getting more frequent and weird, saying things like, "I love you so much. I can't wait for you to realize it's me, and we can be together forever." At the time, I was working part-time at a 7-Eleven from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. One night after my shift, I was walking around my car to get to the driver's side door when I saw someone kneeling by it. I took a step back in shock and started screaming. The person ran toward me, tackled me to the ground, but instead of punching or anything like that, they just kept saying in a quiet voice, "Shh, calm down, it's me, it's me." I recognized the voice, but in my panic, I couldn't remember who it belonged to. As I struggled to get free, their hoodie fell back, and I instantly recognized Carol. At first, I begged in confusion, then my begging turned into anger. She held me tighter and told me to calm down. Thankfully, the night manager happened to be outside smoking and heard the commotion. He started running toward my car. Carol jumped up and tried to tell the manager that I was her girlfriend and told him to back off, but I managed to scream for him to call the police. That's when Carol got angry and started punching me in the face. The manager quickly pushed Carol off of me so I could get up. I hid behind him, crying and gasping for air, while Carol just stood there. She stood there staring at me without blinking. To my surprise, she started crying. Her expression showed genuine agony, but her eyes never left mine. For a moment, I actually felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the punches, and I realized how insane she was. The police arrived and took Carol away. Her parents took care of the school paperwork to withdraw her, and I never heard from Carol again. The origin of the incident was a rumor I heard, so I'm still not entirely sure what happened. I was told that when I gave Carol my phone number at our first meeting, she thought it was a sign from me. She tried to woo me with her secret notes. When she finally worked up the courage to call me, my phone number didn't work. Either I gave her the wrong number, or she entered it incorrectly. Carol took that as an insult and something she had to correct by winning me over. Then she attacked me at my job when I didn't react the way she wanted me to. I've since graduated and gotten an office job. Regardless of whether the end of the story is true or not, that encounter was more than enough to haunt me to this day. I'll never forget the helpless feeling of her on top of me and the punches full of hatred.
Thank you for watching until the end. As mentioned earlier, our goal of reaching 50,000 subscribers in 2026 is still ongoing. If you enjoy these stories, please give us a hand and support us.